Hi guys, welcome back. We are now on chapter 12 of The Barren Grounds by David A. Robertson. We have learned that the kids are in an area called Mizwa and that time is at a different speed there. It seems to be a lot faster than back on Earth. Morgan thought there might have been a couple hours difference between the time that Eli went into the portal and then she followed. However, once she's got there to Mizwa, it's come out that Eli has been there now for over 2 weeks, 15 days. Okay, chapter 12. Morgan, Eli, and Ochek sat on the benches in front of the fire pit. Morgan was reaching her hands out towards the fire, taking in the warmth gratefully. Ochek and Eli hadn't stopped looking at her, waiting for her to say something about the truth she'd just learned. Eli had been living here for 15 days, but she didn't know what to say because she didn't know what to think, so she just stared into the crackling flames. At least she calmed down now. Not long ago, her heart had been pounding out of her chest like she was in some Looney Tunes show. Was it any different, though? That instead of a kid's cartoon, she was actually in a fantasy world? She'd always escaped, in a way, to the world she was reading about. But to actually do it? See here? She could hear Ochek clearly in her memory. This is when I saved Eli from the Barren Grounds, just like I saved you from them today. She repeated his words over and over in her mind. In the end, it was how he'd said the words, rather than what he'd said, that brought Morgan out of her silence. It has been over 2 weeks since he arrived in Mizwa. Morgan said in her best Ochek impression, "Shouldn't you have said something like, Eli has been here for many moons, or something? You talk exactly how people talk. Humans." "That's silly," Ochek said. "Who would talk like that? Many moons," he scoffed. "The sun rises and falls and rises again. One day. Simple." "That's seriously what you want to know, Morgan?" Eli asked. "No, Morgan rubbed her temples. "I have a million things in my head and I have no idea how to get them out." Okay, so Morgan is just confused. She's like, okay, I'm at this different area. I don't know really where I am. Time is faster here. And yet this Fisher, who walks upright like a human being, is talking to me exactly like a human being. She's like, shouldn't you talk a bit differently? I am somewhere different. Shouldn't you sound different? Shouldn't you talk in a different lingo, maybe even a different language? And he's like, no, this is how I talk. "Maybe I can try to answer a question you had when you first got here," Ochek offered. "I don't really remember much about that," she said. "I passed out, if you'll recall." "You asked before how I would know about you," he said. "About humans." She shrugged. "I mean, yeah, that was probably one of the million things I was wondering." "Years ago," Ochek began, "a man came into this place. He arrived through the same portal that you did, in the Great Tree. Back then, the journey from the Great Tree to Mizwa didn't seem as long. The Barren Grounds weren't so arduous. We were living in the green time, when birds and fish and four-legged animals were plentiful, and the land provided everything that we needed." "See?" Morgan almost got up from the bench. "That's what I'm talking about. The green time. That's fantasy world talk." "Why does she keep—" Ochek looked at Eli. "Just keep going," Eli whispered to Ochek. Ochek continued. "The man told us that he came in a good way, and we trusted him, took him into our village. He lived with us for a long time. He learned how to hunt and snare and forage, and we constructed an 8th lodge for him in which he lived. But there came a time when all that was provided to him, which is all anybody would need to live the good life, wasn't enough. He began to want more, and so took more. Of course, we noticed that our stores were getting lower, and that the man began to change. So a man was living there in Mizpah. They taught him all the skills of how to survive and have a happy, abundant life. And yet, it wasn't enough for this man. And he wanted more. And he started taking more. So he was taking from their stores. What that means is like, not a store that you go to buy things from. But when they're talking about from their stores were getting lower, it means their storage. So where they would store their food, their dried meat, their berries, all these things that they have for their survival. That's getting lower because this man is taking more than his share, more than he needs. Okay? You might think he would get full and content, consuming everything the way he was, but it was the opposite. He became gaunt and tired, and the more he took, the more he needed. He took so much that the game around the village began to dwindle. The birds and fish and four-legged animals weren't willing to provide for us anymore. Others in Mizpah began to starve, while the man got hungrier and thinner, and we became afraid of him. Council, under the guidance of our chief, Muskwa, decided to banish the man in order to save our village. Ochek paused. Morgan, and even Eli, who had certainly heard this story before, waited. Tears had wet the fur under the animal being's eyes. They glistened like stars against a black sky. "What's Muskwa mean?" Morgan whispered to Eli as Ochek gathered himself. "Bear," Eli whispered. "Oh, so their names are just what they are?" "Not exactly." "Not exactly? He literally calls me girl. What does not exactly mean?" "Well, he calls me Eli, so..." Ochek went on with a quivering voice that evened out only once the worst parts were told. The kids stopped their whispered conversations to pay him their full attention. On the morning he was to be sent back to his world through the great tree, the village woke to a different world. The man was gone, along with one of our own, Tatikku. That means crane, Eli whispered to Morgan. "See," Morgan whispered. Tatikku had been convinced by the man to run away and lead a different life, Ochek said. "Why would Crane do that? Betray you like that?" Morgan asked. "Maybe he knew what was coming and didn't want to suffer like we have suffered," Ochek said. "You see, the summer birds were gone. They were the ones who brought warmth to the North Country, which created the green time, which ensured the land had the means to provide for us. The wind was hard and strong. The grass and leaves were covered in snow, and the waters were frozen in place as though stuck in time. The weather wasn't new to us, but there had always been a cycle. The birds would travel across this place and distribute their warmth. The green time led to the dying season, which led to the white time, which led to the birthing season. We set off after the man, but he had gone too far already, and we couldn't find him. Mizpah has lived through this cold ever since, and now we are dying." So Ochek is telling a story here, and actually this story very much symbolizes when Europeans and colonizers came over to North America, to Turtle Island, and started to take from the indigenous people who were living there. So at first they came and people worked together. The indigenous people We're helping a lot of the Europeans to survive, to make it, to be able to survive and live a healthy, abundant life in this new land. But that wasn't enough for the majority of the colonizers and the European people, and they wanted more, and they wanted more, and they took more, and they took more. And they took everything from the indigenous people. They took their land, they took their way of life, they built schools and they took their children. They took everything. And so when Ochek is explaining how ever since this human came and then wanted more and wanted more and wanted more, there's cycles that they used to go through. The green time, which is what we would call summer, the dying season, which is fall, white time, winter, and the birthing season would be spring. Those cycles have stopped, and they're stuck in this white time. Okay? Nothing can grow in the winter. Nothing can have, no animals would have babies in the winter, so there's not a lot of animals left to hunt. There's nothing to forage. And it seems to be coming down to, it's almost like they're cursed. They're stuck in this white time, and now we are dying. Okay, we're going to leave it there. I'll do the next video for this chapter in the next video. Okay, bye guys.